So a memorandum of understanding has been signed between South Africa and Zimbabwe for the transfer of treated water. Water and Sanitation Minister Senzo Mchunu, together with his Zimbabwean counterpart, Dr. Anxious Jongwe Masuka, signed the deal yesterday in Musina. The treated water will be transferred from the Beitbridge Water Treatment Works to Musina, a town that has been plagued by water issues for years. But let's unpack this now with Dr. Ferrial, who is Watercan Executive Manager. Thank you so much for joining us. Really a pleasure to have you with us. I know that I looked you up and I saw that you were named Daily Mavericks Environmental Champ of the Year in December. So good to have you, and I guess we're speaking to the right person. The MOU, do you think this is...
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Really wonderful to have you. The MOU, do you think this is a step in the right direction?
Well, I think it's how you look at it. I think it's an interesting one because if you just think about the fact that Zimbabwe cannot actually supply water to its own people. In the capital, in Harare, people are actually cut off from water for a few hours a day. And this is a daily occurrence. But now they're exporting water to South Africa. So if you are Zimbabwean, I think that you wouldn't be smiling on this particular MOU. I think to add to that is that, this agreement was signed, I think, was not signed, but was working on since 2015. But South Africa has also has failed to actually deal with the water issues in our own country. Why could we not actually provide water? The issues in Musina have been going on for a number of years. So I think that it's an interesting one. I think we're quick to support it because yes, the people in Musina need water. But I think it's a little bit more complex than that. Yeah.
I think what's interesting, and we played the package earlier, obviously looking at some of the water woes in Musina. And I think what stood out for me is that you have, this area now that's also got issues around cholera, which is an issue in Zim as well, Dr. Adam.
Yes, I think if they're saying that they're going to provide, they're going to have a whole waste treatment plant, water treatment plant, set up a whole new one for this, I think the water from the taps would be fine. It's the water that you're drinking because a lot of people in Zimbabwe don't have water in their taps, they are dependent on rivers and streams. And that's, where people are getting the cholera from.
Yeah. About 15 million cubic meters per annum. Is that a lot? Is that sufficient?
I think for a town like Musina, that could be sufficient. I think you're talking in terms of the population that are there. But it needs to also take into consideration the fact that with climate change, will they be able to keep up that volume?
Yeah. So, the likelihood then that we see this MOU in place when you talk about the high demand for water that is in Zim as well.
I think it will be in place. The government will do what it wants to do in terms of selling water to a neighboring country. So I think that, that is being done and they've signed the agreement, but we need to remember that people there don't have water. So can you imagine if it was the other way around? Think about South Africa's water woes right now. And if we had gone and started selling water, that would create quite an uproar.
Yeah. And let's talk about our own water woes, if you will, from a broader point of view. And perhaps let me come back to Johannesburg, which has been a big talking point this week, certainly with the Eikenhof pump station being hit by lightning. You've actually just this morning published a piece titled Water Woes, Joburg's Urgent Wake-Up Call. You say what we've seen over the past 11 days is a wake-up call. And you've actually talked about just the very condition that our wastewater treatment works actually look like in Johannesburg. Talk to us about that. There's a great example that you make in there about Olandsvlei wastewater treatment works. Give us that scenario first, and then we'll go broader.
Okay, so I think the idea was to highlight that it's more than just our drinking water that we're not getting in our taps. It's also our wastewater treatment works that are failing across the city, the greater Johannesburg. There was a video that was going out, and it's a video of the Olandsvlei wastewater treatment work where the sewage were going in and just flowing out into the Klip River, but gushing out. And the report from the people on the ground was that they believe that this was done because of vandalism, but also that no one is standing or, situated at the wastewater treatment work. And in their words, on the ground, it's been abandoned by government. So that's the kind of thing that's happening all over. I don't know if you remember, but we have laid criminal charges against Joburg and the municipal manager for exactly this reason, with 2 other wastewater treatment works in the south of Johannesburg.
Sure. I mean, that's a frightening thought. Sewage flowing into the Klip River and no one manning, not a single person manning the wastewater treatment work. I mean, that's very, very concerning, and certainly something for us to look into as well here on Newzroom Afrika. Let's talk about capacity, right? 15 million people living in Gauteng. That's an increase in population over the past decade. We used to be at 12 million. Urbanization, no surprises there. And we've never actually, upgraded our systems to actually deal with that growing population.
Absolutely. And now if you actually speak to people in Joburg Water or Rand Water, they'll talk about this high demand and high consumption. But it's not like population just increases in a second. The planning that needs to be in place seems to be missing. So now we're having to deal with the same amount of water that's abstracted, that was for 12 million, being abstracted now for 15 million. Because the way it works is that Rand Water gets a water use license from the Department of Water and Sanitation for the amount of water that they can abstract from the rivers and streams. Now, that's understandable, because if you take out too much, you could kill the ecosystem, right? The river ecosystem. You could affect the river system as a whole. So you have to be cautious about that. We were supposed to have had the Lesotho Highlands Project Phase 2 on board now to alleviate some of those challenges.
Right.
But that's been delayed for about 8 to 9 years. We'll only see it come, on board 2030.
Sure. So, I mean, there's obviously a lack of a sense of urgency. This stood out in the piece that you wrote, and I want to read from it, if you will. The city, being Johannesburg, loses 46.1% of clean drinking water through what is called non-revenue water. Just the number is frightening, but what is non-revenue water?
So non-revenue water is a few things. Firstly, it's the non-billable water. So where the city is not billing people properly or not getting payment there. The next issue is theft. So there are people who are extracting. So, every time you think of theft, people think of illegal connections. It's not only that. It's about people working without a proper water use license, people just using water without actually paying for it. So that's theft, right? The final one is the one that we are really concerned about, is the amount of leakage. 25% of our clean, fresh drinking water is lost through leaks. And if you look around Joburg, you can see it.
Yeah, and you can. That's the reality. But that's a lot. A quarter of our water in Johannesburg lost due to leaks. Very, very concerning. Another thing that you've done is also look at the challenges, not just in Johannesburg, Musina, but that you've got similar issues in eThekwini. I mean, no surprises. We've been reporting on water shortages and water cuts in eThekwini. People that live in Cape Town will always remind you of the day that they were counting down to day zero. So they have their issues as well.
Correct. And it's not just the day zero, because yes, there is an issue in terms of supply. Because remember, what people don't often see is the inequality of access to water. So lower income households have less access than, I would say, middle class. So if you look at the percentage that at least 46% of South Africans have a tap in their home, a lot of that is wealthier homes. So poor people have to either go to a communal tap, or they have to depend on the rivers and streams around them, which is highly polluted. So it becomes this kind of cycle. And even in places like eThekwini and Cape Town, the wastewater treatment works are also problematic, because it's also failing infrastructure. It's old. And you're finding sewage that is now flowing into our beaches across the country.
What about I mean, what do you make of the quality of our water? I remember, and you've put this down as well, in December, that release of the blue drop, green drop and no drop reports. Where do you stand on how you rate the quality of water that we do get?
The quality of our water in some of the big metros is still quite good, and you can drink it. But you have to. The difficulty with that is it's not such a blanket answer anymore, because if you look at the water cuts and the extended periods of water cuts, that could influence the kind of pollution within the pipes.
Yeah.
So when people get it for a little while, it might not be great. But generally, the water we're getting from Joburg Water, that's also happening in other parts of the country in big cities. But in many of our metros, 46% of our drinking water systems is not fit for drinking. So Free State, Northwest, Northern Cape, those are areas that you should think twice before you actually drink the water. We've had people on our activist citizen science network that have tested tap water in these parts of the country and have found E. coli in it.
Goodness me, that's terrifying. That is terrifying. I mean, we're going to have to leave it there, and I really wish we had more time. But it's such an insightful conversation, a concerning conversation, obviously. And I think just as we wrap up the conversation and we talk about how much work we need to do from an infrastructure point of view, I wanted to close it with this coming out of your piece. Only 46% of households have a tap inside their homes, and approximately 10% of our population still rely on rivers and streams. That's just a reminder of how far we have to go. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Dr. Ferrial Adams, Watercan Executive Manager, on that discussion.